You've never played on a CDJ before. You only have a DJ controller at home and don't have $6K to spend. What if there was a way to get comfortable on CDJs without even touching them, using only the gear you already have? In this video, I'm going to show you the settings I use to make rekordbox behave more like a club setup, how you can turn your controller into a CDJ for less than $1, and how I prepare my library to guarantee my tracks will work even on 20-year-old CDJs. Playing at home on rekordbox and a laptop is a completely different experience to playing on CDJs. You have way more functionality, tools that make it easier to find tracks on the fly, and infinitely more possibilities for creative performance. To learn how to DJ on CDJs, we need to make rekordbox as bad as possible. Fortunately, Pioneer gave us a decent head start. I'll be showing everything today on rekordbox 7, but if you're using an older version, all the settings are the same. For better or worse, rekordbox helps us DJ using our eyes as well as our ears. This is one of the key habits you're going to need to break if you want to be confident on CDJs. Stacked waveforms help us line up the beat grids on both our tracks so that we can see if they're in time. On most CDJs except the 3000, there are no stacked waveforms, so we're going to get rid of them in rekordbox. You can do this by changing the view drop down here to browse, or alternatively just press the spacebar. This reduces things down to just give us the waveform overview for each deck. This view is much more similar to what you'd see on a couple of CDJs. Unless you're lucky enough to be playing on CDJ 3000s, you'll be stuck with either RGB or blue waveforms. If you're currently using the freeband waveform like I do, you're going to need to get rid of it. Go into Preferences, View, Color, and choose either blue or RGB for the waveform. To be extra prepared, I recommend using blue. This will work on the absolute widest range of CDJs you're likely to come across. If you need some help reading those different waveform colors, I've done a video on that which I'll link to in the description. Laptop screens are much bigger than CDJ screens. That means it's possible to see a lot of track information at once, but on many older CDJs you get a total of 3 columns, and one of them is cover art. CDJ 3000s do have a few more, but we want to train for the worst possible scenario. Let's replicate this view in rekordbox. Right-click on the column headings and uncheck everything except artwork, artist, and title. Having such limited information about your tracks visible at once is pretty tough at first, but it really forces you to become more familiar with the tracks in your library. And this is a DJ superpower that's always worth training. Now, one of the biggest fears DJs have is how their controller might do things differently to how a CDJ does the same thing. And one big one is how they handle hot cues. Now, this really threw me off the first time I came across it. On most controllers, the hot cues are in what's called gated mode. Scenario 1 is when the track is stopped. When you press a hot cue, the track will play for as long as you hold the hot cue down. When you release your finger, the track will stop and jump back to the cue point. Scenario 2 is when the track is already playing. This time, when you press the hot cue, the track will jump to it and continue playing. CDJs don't bother with scenario 1. When you press a hot cue on a CDJ, it will just start playing regardless of whether the track is stopped or not. Because I use this gated mode all the time, a few days before I know I'm going to be playing with CDJs, I change this setting to work differently. This is so I can retrain my muscle memory a bit. Open Preferences, Controller, Deck, and find the hot cue section. Uncheck during pause gate playback is applied. Your hot cues will now function exactly the same as they would on a CDJ. What if I told you your controller was already a CDJ and that Pioneer's marketing department has just been tricking you? The fact is, even entry-level controllers like the FLX4 do 90% of the same stuff, aside from maybe taking beer spillages and vomit a little less well. We need to give our controller a makeover, and we can do it with this, a $1 roll of masking tape. There are a lot of buttons and knobs on your controller that you just won't find on CDJs. To make sure we don't accidentally use technology from this century, we're going to downgrade our gear using the tape. I'll show you on my CDJ 1000, but if you've got a different controller, the process is the same. For this video, we're mainly going to be interested in the deck section of the controller. I'm going to use the OG CDJ 2000 as the benchmark, which is probably one of the oldest CDJs you'll be likely to encounter. First, let's tape over all pad modes except hot cues. Then, tape over every pad except the first 3. I'll explain why later. The page buttons can go to. This isn't a library. Bye-bye shift button, back to the keyboard where you belong. Dual layer is the tech house of controller functions. Confusing and unnecessary. It's gone. Keysync and slip reverse are gone as well. Nobody liked you anyway. And so is the dedicated quantize button. I think I just ran out of social media engagement. We're removing sync. I obviously can't go through every single controller in this video. So what I recommend is you find a picture of the CDJ you're going to be playing on and compare it to your controller. Anything that's on your controller that's not on the CDJ, tape it up, and then practice playing at home with this more limited set of controls. Rekordbox gives controller DJs insane ways to organize and prepare our tracks. Want 16 hot cues? No problem. 45 different tags? Yeah. Advanced filtering in playlists? Go for it, mate. This helps us create super personalized workflows and ways of filtering our tracks during our sets. But you could find yourself in big trouble with this megalomaniac attitude to track preparation. The oldest CDJs are very limited when it comes to browsing and filtering your music. And if you rely heavily on metadata that they don't support, your set could be in trouble. Now, I'm a hot cue junkie. I use them to hop around tracks as markers for transition points or to drop in samples or acapellas. When we were taping up our controller, you might remember I asked you to leave just 3 of the pads. Well, the reason for this is because there's still plenty of CDJs in the world that only have a maximum of 3 hot cues. And I definitely set more than this. But what I do now is prioritize my first 3. That means when I'm playing at home, I have more choice, but when I'm playing on a CDJ, I can be sure that I've got at least 3 hot cues that will help me mix. So ask yourself a question: if I could only set 3 hot cues, where would I put them? For me, the absolute essentials are 1 on the drop, 1 8 bars before, and 1 16 bars before. From there, I can kind of work things out. But this still isn't enough, because you may run into something truly terrifying, and it's so old it makes a T-Rex look like a TikTok influencer. It's a CDJ 900 Nexus, and it has no hot cues at all. To be truly prepared, it's time to do something you may never have done before as a controller DJ. Go on a date. Not really, it's setting memory cues on your tracks. Seriously though, give her a call. Memory cues may seem like hot cues at first glance, but they actually work in a very different way. You can only set memory cues when the track is stopped, and you can only access them in chronological order. Even controllers like the FLX4 can access memory cues with the cool cue buttons. So why bother with these when hot cues can do the same thing? Well, memory cues are compatible with a much wider range of CDJs, and importantly, you can set more than 3. A lot of DJs, including me, use hot cues as markers in the track. I don't really use them for performing. I use them more as a visual guide as to where things happen. When we're limited to 3 hot cues, memory cues can help fill this gap. Setting them up is a little different to hot cues. Find the spot you want to add the memory cue, press the main cue button, and then press M or click on one of the empty slots. Recently, I've been showing loads of CDJ and Rekordbox tips on my newsletter that I don't always have time to cover in videos. You can sign up for free in the description. One of Rekordbox's most powerful features is My Tag. It lets you create a completely bespoke tagging system for your tracks. It's also perfect for finding the next track on the fly because you can do some insane filtering with it. But there's a problem. My Tag doesn't even exist on the CDJ 2000 Nexus and older, and although it is available on newer CDJs, it's a bit of a faff to actually use in practice. For that reason, I recommend you pay attention to what tags you filter by regularly, and then instead create intelligent playlists that match those filtering rules. You can then use those playlists on any CDJ even when My Tag filtering is not available. But that brings us to another big difference between CDJ and laptop DJing. To play on CDJs, you need to get your music onto one of these, a USB drive. That means you need to understand Rekordbox's export mode. So check out this video next where I teach you how to use export mode to make sure that your library is bulletproof for whatever CDJ you happen to walk up to.